Hello everyone, my name is Lori Caldwell and I'm with StopWaste. I'm one of their compost educators and I'm coming to you from our beautiful garden here in downtown Oakland. Right now we are going to go on a tour of some of our beautiful Alameda County residents who love to do their own composting. So come on and join me. Well, first we are going to go to Oakland where we're going to meet my friend Claudia. She does composting right in her own backyard. Then we're headed off to Berkeley to meet Joyce, who does worm composting right in her own kitchen. Then we're headed to Fremont, the leaf stone garden. There at Urban Farm, we're going to see how they do their on-site composting. And then finally, we're headed off to Byron to see Byron at Oliveira Enterprises to see a commercial composting facility and see how that works. Well, before we get started, let's all get on the same page about what composting actually is. What is compost? Eventually, all living things break down and decompose. Composting speeds up the process and makes a wonderfully dark, crumbly, and earthy material called compost. Compost is not soil. It's food for the soil. Compost gives nutrients to plants and soil critters. Compost helps soil hold on to moisture. And compost builds healthy soil that grows healthy food. Well, we've got a lot of people to meet and a lot to learn from them. So let's go ahead and get started. First stop, Claudia's backyard. Well, Claudia, your garden is gorgeous. I'd love to hear the story about it.
Okay, well, when I first got here, it had one poor little pitiful peach tree that didn't last long. I couldn't get anything to grow, so I took a class and learned how to upgrade. I learned how to compost. I added it to my garden and put I think 3 inches of it. The soil was really hard and compacted, so 3 inches of it, put it on here, and within a year I could grow anything I wanted to.
Oh, right on.
And the birds and the bees started coming. The real benefit of it is it just does wonders for the soil. When I first got here, the soil was rock hard clay. Once I started adding that compost in there, it started loosening up and really started retaining water. If your soil is turning sandy, it will even help.
Sure, I have sandy soil too, so you want those particles to clump together and you want them to hold onto water and provide some nutrition a lot longer than it normally would.
Exactly.
Sure.
And the compost works like magic.
What do you put in it? What are you feeding it normally from this beautiful garden?
A little bit of this, a little bit of that. I've got wood chips, I've got leaves, and I also put my food scraps in here.
Oh, right on. Well, we were definitely going to talk about that, so maybe we should go take a peek. Looks like celery. Red cabbage, definitely a lot of coffee grounds back here, including the filters. Those are super compostable. Our banana peel. Oh, lovely eggshells. Those are great. Look at real life out here.
Uh-oh.
Produce sticker, which is plastic and definitely not biodegradable. Definitely want to peel these away and put them in the garbage for sure.
Okay.
They do not belong in mixing with our compost, just contamination. I thought we could add some food scraps to the pile.
That sounds good.
Show people how to do it.
Yeah.
So Claudia, maybe we can take a look where you put organic materials that don't belong in the home compost? You put meats and dairy and food salt paper in your green bin. Now all of this will get picked up and taken away to a commercial composting facility that can easily process this. And then what do you got there? Yeah, Bermuda grass definitely needs to go into the green cart for sure.
Things you don't want in the yard, put it
Absolutely.
in the green bin. So I just move the mulch back a little bit, add a little compost around the base of the plant, and you just water it down and it'll be happy.
That's super easy.
Eventually the compost works itself into that soil, loosening it up. So when I add it to the pots, I just kind of move the foliage away and I sprinkle some in. Sprinkle it around.
That's so easy. Claudia, what was that tip you had to keep strawberries fresh longer?
My strawberries, I've tried the vinegar wash. You wash them in 3 parts water, 1 part vinegar, and then you dry them off real nicely, and you can store them for about 10 days. The max I've had is 10 days. About on that 10th day, though, they're gone.
Right, they go instantly. Oh, thank you so much for sharing your abundance with me. This is gonna become tea.
Okay.
And then, you know, I use oregano for everything, so. Thank you so much for all
You're welcome.
all the treats, all the garden treats. That's definitely nice.
Great.
And we definitely do an exchange of recipes. That would be great. Isn't Claudia's garden just beautiful? We saw how she makes compost from her yard trimmings and food scraps. And that compost is easy to use in the garden to build healthy soil and grow delicious food. Not everyone has a backyard for a compost bin, so let's head over to our friend Joyce's apartment to see how she composts with worms in the kitchen.
Lori!
Hi,
Hey!
Joyce. Hey!
How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Good. Come on in.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
My name is Joyce. I currently live at Berkeley, California, and I've been keeping up my worm bin for about like 2 years.
That's great. And how did you get into worm composting?
Yeah, so it actually started with you. You started me on this journey a couple years ago. I went to the library where they were offering a worm composting workshop, and then I learned everything I needed to know there. Yeah, it was a great experience.
Oh, good. I'm so glad to hear that.
So Lori, can I show you my worm bin?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I'd love to see it.
So my worm bin lives in my kitchen in this little shelf table thing. And here it is.
Oh, I love it.
Thank you.
Oh, this looks great, Joyce.
Yeah.
So, I mean, how are you finding the whole process?
Yeah, well, it's been really, really simple and like low effort for me. There's not much cost that goes into a worm bin, right? You just
Yeah.
put in your waste. I put in extra paper scraps in there. And maybe the most surprising thing I learned from a worm bin is that there's just no odor at all. So I live in an apartment and it's a really small space. This is just one bin. That's all it is. So I can slide it under the desk over there and it's pretty out of the way too.
Everybody looks, happy. There's a lot of worms. Oh, look.
Yeah.
I found a worm egg. So, this basically just becomes a whole little ecosystem basically right here in your kitchen, which is great. So what do you generally feed them?
Yeah, usually I generally feed them food scraps, vegetable scraps that I don't already feed to my rabbits in my case. So I've just put a layer of food and then I'm gonna bury it back up with these paper coverings.
Castings are great for ornamentals or for edibles.
Great.
So let's give it a try.
Okay, yes please.
So we're just going to take a little bit out because fortunately it's more of a fertilizer than a soil amendment. So for this basil, I'm just going to put a little bit around the base here. And the key, once you do that, is to make sure that once you've kind of put it here on top of the soil, that you're going to want to make sure you're always going to want to water it in after the fact.
Okay.
Get those castings down into the soil. Those are beautiful.
Thank you. They're green onions I grew in the little backyard over there.
Right on. That's
Yeah,
great.
I'm since there's so much and I can't use it all at once, I'm hoping to just chop it up into little pieces and freeze them in the freezer to use for later. So this is what I usually do. I'll just chop it up and then when I need to cook a soup or a dish, I'll just grab a handful from the freezer and I'm good to go.
That's totally awesome. That's a great tip. Thanks.
Great.
Just like at Claudia's, Joyce's apartment also has a green bin for her to place extra food scraps and anything that shouldn't go in a worm compost bin. As a person who keeps her worm bin in the living room, I was very happy to see Joyce keeping hers in her kitchen. Joyce's worm bin is tidy, making it easy to store. It produces 0 odors. Her bin is the perfect example of how to compost food scraps at home, even with limited space. Joyce was encouraged on how to worm compost through the Fremont organization LEAF, We'll head there next to meet Elaine and learn about their compost system and how they make it. Well, thank you so much, Elaine, for having us here today. Why don't you start off on telling us about LEAF and what you folks do here?
Okay, well, thanks for coming here. What we do here is we like to educate the community through positive environmentalism. What does that mean? That actually means to bring the community in with us and teaching them about using regenerative agricultures to grow healthy food. It means teaching them about gleaning their own fruit trees and bringing it here to donate to the food banks. So what we want to do is we really want to get people involved. That's probably the biggest takeaway I would tell you.
So Elaine, I understand that this garden is sitting on clay soil, but you've done a lot of great soil building techniques to kind of be able to work with that. Tell me about that, please.
So I think the first thing we did is we used compost as mulch. And basically we did the sheet mulching and we put tons of compost on top. The second thing we do is actually we use it as a top dressing. So anytime we clear the old crops off, we put a top dressing of compost on there. And then thirdly, we use compost when we are transplanting seedlings. So we've got huge doses of compost in here. It's constantly being worked into the soil. And I think as a result, the soil is so much easier to work. We see a lot more earthworms in there. We see a lot more microbial activity.
Right now we're here in the bee sanctuary and we really got distracted by all the pollinators that we see here.
So this is our bee sanctuary. This is one of our favorite spaces. So we integrate annual and perennial herbs and flowers inside the garden, the edible garden. So if you look around in the morning, it's so gorgeous. You get to see butterflies, you get to see birds, you get to see all different types of bees, native bees and our honey bees. And as a result, we get really good pollination of all of our fruits and vegetables. This is one of our main gardens. We actually produce 50% of what we harvest from this garden alone. And we take all that harvest and we actually bring it to 2 food banks, one in Fremont and one in Union City. And we try to, as much as possible, grow culturally relevant foods. So we actually talk to the food banks about what they need. And actually, for an example, one thing that we really learned is we were growing those big globe eggplants and they said, "Hey Elaine, that's really too big for a family that only has 1 or 2 people. So can you grow smaller ones?" And we're going, "Sure we can grow anything." And the other thing they said they really need a lot of are greens, because greens are pretty fragile. And so it's really hard for them to get that from people. But since we harvest and we deliver within 2 hours, they can actually use that stuff right away. So we actually have a 3-bin compost system over in the other garden. And we use all the plant debris in there and we do the greens and the browns and we water it and we pitchfork it. Pretty much it's cold composting. It takes about 6 months for it to decompose. And then we screen it and then we actually let it cure for another 6 months. It's enough for us to use it as a soil amendment for a lot of our trees, but it's not to cover this whole huge garden. So we actually go and buy commercial compost. So we purchase typically once a year in spring before we really actually go and use it as a top dressing. But that has been increasing and increasing as our garden expands.
And then what about like the amount of volunteers that you have? We're here today at the garden and we're kind of surrounded by your volunteers that came here today to do a little bit of harvesting for the food bank. I would love to hear you talk about that too.
Yay! We've got core volunteers that have been with us, including myself actually. We've been here for over 7 years. We come twice a week. We garden now year round. We just learn from one another. Gardening is not a stagnant practice. It is an evolving practice.
Constantly
and you
evolving.
think you know everything and the plant's going, no way, we're gonna do something totally different this year.
So you may not compost the way that Claudia or Joyce or even Elaine do, but you actually do participate in composting by putting stuff in your green bin. Now the material that you put in your green bin gets composted on a commercial scale. Thank you so much for having us here.
No problem.
I would love to start by just kind of hearing the story of Oliveira Enterprises.
Okay, well, Oliveira Enterprises is a family-ran business. It's me, my father, and my sister. We've been in the composting industry for 26 years. This is where all the composting happens, is right here.
Well, Brian, I would love to hear about the entire process.
Okay.
How stuff comes in, what you do with it, and then how it eventually becomes compost and goes out.
Okay, well, over here we are the full circle. We have our own roll-off trucks and walking floors that go around and collect our green waste feedstock. Over here we process 100% green waste. We bring it in. Then after that, the grinder starts the process of grinding it up. We stockpile that material, and then from there, as the finished material that's done in the rows goes to the trommel screen, we add new material to start the process all over again. It's just one big circle of composting, of microbial action.
Right. Well, what about this stuff though?
Well, that's the stuff that we try to keep out of it.
Sure.
We do get some plastic, light plastic, hard plastic. The worst thing is the glass. Glass is the worst thing. We beg people not to put it in there. If you want to have a good finished product, you have to start out with a good quality, clean feedstock.
This is the first stop where everything starts happening, correct?
That's correct.
So we have our grinder, which I just found out actually doesn't grind things, but hammers stuff.
Smashes, hammers.
Smashes and hammers
Yes.
it to smaller pieces, of course,
Yes.
and we see that behind us.
Uh-huh.
That stuff goes into windrows. and-
Yes, we're continuously putting material into rows. It's a full circle. So as we're pulling material out that's finished through the composting process, we're adding in new material into rows right behind. This is where all the quote unquote magic happens. This is basically a massive, long microbial feedlot. Basically, the microbes are in the pile. That's what's actually breaking down the organic matter and turning it into compost. And basically, we're trying to create the most happiest environment that they can have. So we have a large turner that straddles that pile and aerates the whole thing, adding oxygen back into the pile. The other thing that we add is moisture, because just like us humans, they get thirsty when they're eating and they need a drink. In order for it to become composted, it has to be turned 3 times, maintain a temperature of over 131 degrees for 15 days.
Oh.
And then it's gone through the technical composting process. Basically, all your bad bacteria, your fecal coliforms, E. coli, salmonellas have been cleaned out of the product. You have only good bacteria in your product at that time. But you still have to have that breakdown process. And that's what takes the extra 2 to 3 months.
Can we peek in one of these windrows?
Absolutely.
Oh, yay.
We can open it up and see.
This would be the best place to...
Yeah.
Ah, gorgeous. Good moisture.
Yeah.
Holds together.
Yeah.
Smells great.
Yeah.
Right on.
Well, we checked it, make sure that it has the earthy smell and the color that we're looking at and the breakdown percentage that we're looking for. So now this material is ready to go over to the trommel screen.
Okay, I would love to see that.
All right.
Let's go check it out. We are in front of a giant pile of finished compost, just screened.
The 2 key reasons for screening is for sizing your finished product, and secondary is for contamination, to clean contamination from your finished product. Your fine material goes through the trommel screen grates, and that's the material that we market as our finished compost. Compost doesn't have to be black in color to be good compost. It can be brown, it can be dark brown, it doesn't make a difference. I like the little bit bigger particle size because I think it helps with aeration of your soil, and also it helps all those little pieces of wood when you irrigate, they'll swell up, so it holds the moisture in your ground just that little bit longer.
So then now we get through the windrows, we go through the screener, we get a finished product.
Yep.
And then what happens with that?
Some of it gets sold back to the landscapers that we actually are collecting the material from.
I love that recycling.
Yeah, and then we are actually the main suppliers for some of the major bagging companies around here. And then another portion of it is used for agriculture and other people's farms, and also we farm ourselves over 2,000 acres. Multiple wins when it comes to the compost. With our corn ground, we've cut back as much as 2 irrigations on corn.
Nice.
Just by utilizing compost in our field. It's one of those things that farmers have to realize, and it's all about the education of it.
Oliveira is a large-scale composting facility. They play an important role in turning green waste and other organic materials into compost. Facilities like Oliveira compost the materials we put in our green bin. Well, we saw so many great examples of composting here in Alameda County. And as a potential composter, it's really about finding a system that works best for you. And here at StopWaste, we are totally here to support you on your composting journey. So good luck and happy composting. You can visit StopWaste's website for more information on how to get started and check out our other gardening and compost videos too.